Hi there, I'm Charlotte Howard. I'm the Economist New York Bureau Chief, and I'm thrilled this morning to be joined by Bozoma Saint John, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at William Morris Endeavor. Bozoma, how are you?
Hi, good morning. I'm very well, thank you.
Is Lions Live.
So there's so much to talk through in our 25 minutes, and I'm really excited for this conversation. I was hoping we might start just by giving us the big picture, what your strategy was for this year before all this turmoil we've had, and how the pandemic has changed that.
Well, yes, I would I would say that none of us have seen anything like this before. So there was no forecast, no strategy, no vision that would have at all prepared us for anything like this. I mean, I think most of us go into a year, of course, with our strategies set and locked, with our forecasts and our goals set, and you make some allowances for issues that could come of the business, but nothing like this. And so I would say, Charlotte, that things have certainly changed. I mean, our business is primarily talent representation, live events, and media. And so a majority of that has come to a pause with now a little bit of an eking of movement in the business. And so we are steady trying to create, new ways for consumers to engage. Obviously, we do a lot of B2C work, but B2B is also part of the business. And so trying to figure out how to help other businesses innovate, think through their strategies, and execute has been a part of the renewed strategy and business plan.
So maybe could you give us an example of one of those new projects that you've been pursuing, just so people have a sense of how you've been able to pivot?
Yeah. Well, for instance, I operate the New York Fashion Weeks, including all the fashion events. And what our team is right now trying to figure out is how to innovate in that space. Right. Obviously, it has been a mostly physical experience, and at this point, trying to make it digital and make it virtual. There have been some other examples out in the marketplace of trying to take events like that, which are very high touch, not so high touch given our current environment. And it has been really challenging, because for most of us, even though we've dipped our toe in the water of, digital activation, it hasn't been the core of the business. It hasn't been the way to primarily engage consumers. And so for us, we're trying very quickly to adapt and figure out how to keep consumers and clients engaged, as well as deliver what could be and should be perhaps what will be the future of Fashion Week. And as you can imagine, there are also challenges that we are facing given racial and social unrest, and how to pivot our business so that we are more diverse and can make sure that we are supporting designers of color. So there's a lot that we are taking stock into right now and changing and swiftly figuring out a way to create some solutions.
Well, I want to get definitely to the broader question of how to help bring the resources to bear in an environment of social change and how to help accelerate that change. But before we get there, just to stick to some of what you've been doing for Endeavor in the past few months. How have you been working with other actors within the ecosystem to try to become more agile, to try to effectuate some of the changes across your business that you just described? Does that mean bringing in new partners? Is it a different way of working with the partners who you already had relationships with for a long time? How has that broader ecosystem evolved?
Yeah, gosh, it's such a good question because I feel like at this moment in time, portfolio businesses probably are trying to
Yes.
find ways to connect better with each other, right? I mean, it's like if you've ever worked in a portfolio business, the key to action is always some sort of connection architecture, right? That allows for the different businesses to lean on each other. And we are certainly doing that right now. As I mentioned, we have our fashion business that we run, but 160 over 90 is a cultural marketing agency within Endeavor, and which represents a lot of different brands like Visa and Marriott and Lowe's. And so even trying to find solutions for those brands within our portfolio, within our platform of fashion, has been one of the ways in which we are quickly trying to navigate this space. Because in solving their business challenges, we also then solve ours. Whereas like in the past, we were very concerned and very focused on making sure that the experience was good. Of course, we wanted to make sure that the brands who partnered with us had ways to express themselves in the space or to utilize fashion as a platform. But now we're going to have to innovate quickly together. Because obviously it's like if we're working with Visa on a fashion platform, we've got to very quickly figure out how to make that digital in a way that will still engage their consumers, because there are physical events that they can no longer participate in. So all of us are sort of in the boat trying to figure out how to pivot in this time.
And what's the metric of success there? What are the kind of key KPIs that you're looking for?
KPIs. I'm like, it makes me laugh almost, right? It's probably what my boss does not want me to do, when we talk about what are the measures for success. Because I'm like, in this day and age, with success is still being alive. Success is having a business at the end of this thing. Success is making sure that the brands we represent, the people we work with, the platforms that we create are still in existence when we come out, quote unquote, of this pandemic. And so I'm sorry to laugh, but it is truly a moving target at this point. What success looks like constantly changes on the day to day.
I hear you on that. My personal life reflects that very much. So obviously there are huge challenges, as you just described. Have you seen any surprising opportunities come up in recent months, something that you wouldn't have expected, but actually has been a real positive?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. I always say, I began this sort of, stay-at-home order saying, we're kind of excited, being like, you know what? Although this is a horrible situation, and obviously I had my own fears and concerns. I mean, I have my mom who's staying with me. I have friends who are essential workers, and I was so concerned about their well-being, but at the same time invigorated to use my platform, to use my business, to use everything that I have at my disposal to help, right? To help in some way, whether it's fundraising or creating opportunities that are different for our business now, and figure out ways to just stay engaged. The challenge, of course, has been that this is perhaps one of the greatest marketing tests of all time. And again, just back to the point that none of us have seen this before, I have felt very much challenged by what we can do to essentially create new ways of being and new innovation. And so, the ways that I see sort of trends moving has been maybe what we already started to see, part in the last 5 years, this move towards digital and virtual, this high speed of innovation, that we used to make strat plans that were 5 years out, right? You had 18 months, maybe 36 months and 5 years or so. And now those strat plans don't exist. Back to the reason why I was laughing earlier, right? Our metrics and our KPIs have changed. And so the trends that I'm seeing now are just the speed at which we are moving. That if you are thinking that the plan that you're even creating for a month from now could still stand, you might want to relook at that. And so the trends that I'm seeing are just our own speed. Marketers who are trying to find solutions at a much faster rate, who are going on a sort of gut instinct, right? Versus relying so much on data and analytics that could take some time to get to you. And by the time that gets to you, perhaps even the landscape has changed.
That's really interesting, because presumably the promise of that really fast data analytics is that you should be able to have more real-time information that informs decisions. But it's interesting that even in this digital age, it's not proving fast enough, it sounds like.
It's not moving fast enough. That's what's so insane is that all of the old ways that we used to use to either point us in the right direction or give us feedback on the work that we're doing are now null. You have to be able to really rely on what you can sort of, touch. If, we're not supposed to touch anything in this moment, but, like the way that you're supposed to understand what's happening in culture, really being a part of it and understanding what your own reactions are, relying on what your team is feeling from a creative standpoint in order to get things across the board. Because at this point, we're not able to rely on the data fast enough. Things are happening too quickly. A tweet sends us off. And so we've got to be able to capture people's attention, relate to their emotion, and also reflect the kind of comfort that they need at this moment. And that can't wait. There's no waiting.
Are there ways of working now? Is any of what you just described, do you think that those ways of working will persist once things return to normal, hopefully eventually? Are there different teams within your company or different types of strategies that you think will remain, that actually this proves to be a better way of doing things than you did before? Or is it really just crisis mode and then you'll go back to the way things were?
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever return fully to the way things were, but I do think there are some things that will balance themselves out. I think we're all also very aware that this high rate of speed is probably not the healthiest, not even just for the individuals who are working at this speed, but also for the wellness of the business and of the campaigns and the narratives that we're telling. Obviously, there are many more mistakes that are made when you're moving fast. And so my hope is that we are able to find sort of a middle ground. I certainly don't want to go back to the days of, waiting to understand what the data tells us before we move based on our feeling and our gut. But at the same time, I think the speed at which we're moving really doesn't help us to sit and understand culture, really look at trends that are coming and understand them before we make movements. And so I do hope that there is a little bit of a slowdown in the way that we react, although I think this is really conditioning us to move faster, to be smarter, and to really drive from our human emotion first.
Well, you and I were talking a little bit yesterday about this, but it's an extraordinary time for America and for the Black Lives Matter movement. And you've seen different companies try to seize the moment and support the Black Lives Matter movement, support protests against police violence. And it would be great to hear from you how you have thought about that, both as an individual and within Endeavor, how best to accelerate change, try to galvanize support for change.
Yeah, well, this is actually, I'm again shocked by the moment. Not shocked by racial injustice. I mean, come on, I've been a Black woman for 43 years, so that does not shock me. I've felt it all this time. However, I am shocked by our reaction to it as a business community, because certainly this is not the first time that these types of acts have been committed. Black Lives Matter didn't start yesterday. This movement has been here for some time. The reaction, though, the depth at which different companies and the breadth at which companies are making statements, are looking within themselves, are trying to donate to the right causes is a surprise to me, because I have never seen that kind of broad action before. And so my hope is that it continues, that companies are feeling the pressure of their morals to rectify and to correct an issue and a system that has not been equitable. And we talk about it all the time. I mean, we've had white papers on diversity and inclusion forever. Those are not new papers. They're not new reasons to make sure that your workforce is diverse in order to see the benefits in business. But now the whole world, not even just the US, the whole world is screaming for this change, and to do it now and to do it fast. And so I'm very glad to see the response of businesses to the matter. And I'm not at all upset about those who perhaps didn't say anything before that are saying something now. My whole mission right now is to make every company understand what is happening and then react to it. And so that's going to take some time for sure. But I think at least in the beginning, to be able to recognize it is at least step one in the problem and the solution.
And so then specifically, both with your own projects that you've pursued as an individual, and then also within Endeavor, how has this change happened? Because I think for a long time, there are big companies who might have had a head of diversity and inclusion, but that person might not have had as broad a remit as you had hoped they would, or there have been sort of narrow efforts, as you say, these papers have existed forever within companies to show the benefits to the bottom line of having diverse staff. So how has this moved from sort of a narrow conversation in a tangible way to broader change both within Endeavor, and then it would be great to hear about how you've complemented that corporate work with your work as an individual.
Yeah. Well, that's, this is actually the center of the conversation, which is that I wish that we wouldn't look at our personal responsibilities as separate from our corporate responsibilities. That there is no separation between who I am as a person and what I feel as I react to these inequities and how I behave in the corporate space. And that responsibility, unfortunately, has fallen on the shoulders of people of color for a long time. To bear the responsibility both of what is happening in the world and also bring it into the workplace and try to make changes yourself. I think now we're seeing the responsibility of what we are calling for the action for corporations to do. And therefore, I want business leaders to also react as humans. To take that personal feeling, that heaviness that you feel, that helplessness that says, well, what can I do? Answer that call, both personally and then in the workplace. And so at Endeavor, yes, I think, we're all feeling it very personally. Certainly our chief HR officer, a Black woman, Carrie Chandler, has been doing an extraordinary job of helping to navigate what our internal makeup looks like. We're certainly moving at a speed at which we are trying to rectify some of the challenges that are even within our own house. And I want to make sure I'm very clear that all business leaders need to do that. I see a lot of donations made to external organizations. By the way, that's a good thing. But I also want to see investment internally. And so if there is a chance to rectify a systemic problem, perhaps the system also begins with the corporation in which you sit. And so how are we investing in the support of diverse talent within our portfolios and within our ranks to make sure that they are not just numbers on the board, but also support and able to be included, because we need retention as well. And so personally, I have taken the call. We're marketers. And so what I know how to do best is to manage narratives. And so personally, I worked with 3 friends of mine, Lovey Ajayi-Jones, who is an author, Glennon Doyle, who's also an author, and Stacey Bendet-Eisner, who's the CEO of Alice and Olivia. And there are 2 Black women and 2 white women, and we decided to change the way that our voices are being heard. Because the truth of the matter is that in this day and age, and also, unfortunately, what has happened in the past is that when the world listens to women, which is not often, as we know, but when the world listens to women, it listens to white women. And so at this point, we want to be able to have the voices more equitable. And so we created a campaign called Share the Mic Now, which allowed for Black women to get into the platforms of white women on social media and be able to land their messages in audiences where they probably have not been able to disrupt before, including myself. So knowing that I have access to many platforms such as this, I have access to public spaces, I still feel unheard in most situations, given what I am talking about. And so I was able to land in a spot and in conversation with Kourtney Kardashian to an audience that probably had never heard my voice before. And we feel that in so doing, and by the way, in so sharing the mic across many different types of people, that we'll be able to get a more equitable sound into the world.
I thought it was just an amazing campaign. I came across it last week or the week prior. When was it? Just really recently,
Yeah.
and I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and hope to see more of that in the hope to see more of that to come. I want to have
Thank you.
time though. I know there are people in the audience who want to ask you questions, so I'm being texted all kinds of questions as we speak, and I'm going to start handing them over to you.
Okay.
So the first one is, where are you placing your bets for marketing investments in the next 6 months when everything is so uncertain? So that goes back to that question of long-term planning versus immediacy. So what do the next 6 months look like, and how do you place those investments?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is that, again, I think the moment is so important, that we are looking to the future, of course, as we've all been talking about with trying to figure out how our businesses can survive. But as marketers, our investment needs to be turned more present. And so yes, reacting to what is happening right now is the best strategy. I don't think that we've ever had strategies like that before, right? Or we've always forecasted to where we want to be, but we haven't really paid attention to the present moment in its fullness. And so to me, it's like at this moment, our entire strategy has to be in reacting to what is happening right now. So yes, COVID-19, concerns that people have around that, their comfort, their safety, their anxiety, speaking to those messages, finding solutions for those issues within our businesses. And then now we have racial and social unrest. So how does that also impact our businesses? And so to me, the strategies are more present than ever. This is not about forecasting into the future. It's about what is happening right now. How can my business intersect with the concerns of the community and the consumer right now?
Another good question is, can you share a moment when your CEO hasn't believed in your idea, and what you have done to convince them otherwise? What you've done to convince them that they should support your proposal?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Does this mean they've always just said yes? Does that is that the answer?
I know, right? Well, here's the thing. Here's the real secret. I'm the boss. No, I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
um,
There we go.
yeah, exactly. No, I'm the boss of the idea. And so my goal is always to get my colleagues, the people who work for me on my teams, excited about the idea. That has been my trick all along, that this is not about the one-to-one conversation. If my CEO is going to look an idea that I have, without the cheers and the fans in the hallways and other meetings who are propelling my idea forward, then I have probably failed. And that has been my entire strategy all along. So if there's ever been an idea that I've had that a CEO that I worked for did not like, they didn't just hear my voice. They heard a whole lot of other people's voices telling them that he needed to do it or she needed to do it. So my point is that, listen, at this very moment in time, I'm trying to get all the fans and everybody to be cheering in the same direction. And by the way, if people aren't, then perhaps I do need to retool. And that has also been another way for me to balance the conversation.
I can imagine that's happened to you very rarely, from the sense I'm getting from our conversation. We have a question from someone about the future of professional talent agencies, how talent agencies should evolve to face disruption.
That's a great question too. Obviously, I'm in the business of storytelling, as we all are, and we need people to storytell for us, right? We need actors and actresses and musicians and athletes and artists, painters, visual photographers, all of the talent. Designers. Gosh, there's so many different types of talent that we need them to be able to tell our stories. And so for me, I don't think there's a true change in the business, only in that we need to diversify the way that we are telling the stories, the people who are telling the stories. And that is the change that we're going to see. So right now, I've been having so many interesting conversations with, of course, people who are the gatekeepers for talent and for storytelling. And we've been talking about the fact that you can't necessarily have an experience that is lacking in diversity and be able to tell diverse stories. And so the point is, how do we open the door and make sure that people who have different stories to tell are able to tell their own stories. Obviously, we'll have to address the issue of not having been in diverse spaces before. We'll have to address that. But for right now, talent is key. Diverse talent is key. Making sure that the stories that we're telling, again, across all of the narratives, this is not just about film and TV. This is about sports, and this is about photography, and this is about designers, and this is about, my goodness, politics and speaking. There's so many different types of talent that we represent. But my vision and my strategy and my hope is that we are now at a point that the change will be in the types of stories that we tell and not just in how many.
One last quick question is if someone's breaking into the marketing industry, any advice for them, particularly in this extraordinary time?
Oh, wow. Yeah, good luck. No, I mean, to be serious about it, I'm just going to keep, sort of beating the drum on the storytelling, and being able to really dial into what is happening at this current moment. We're in an extraordinary time, as we all know. And so if you're starting out, know that you are closest to what is happening on the ground. Revolutions were not started by the elderly, they're started by the youth. And that's the truth of it. And so if you're just starting out in marketing, then it is time to hear your voice. It is time to become the expert in what is happening on the ground, and therefore float that information up and become the resource for those who are making the decisions and who are setting strategy. And so make yourself indispensable in that way.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. I'm Charlotte Howard from The Economist. I'm with Bozoma Saint John, William Morris, Endeavor. Great to speak with you, and I'll hand it back to the studio.
Thank you so much, Charlotte.